the day that I realized what a disconnect I had, I went through sadness, I went through sorrow, and I went through guilt. And I think it's very common for people who become vegan and really get what it means to be vegan, that it is about the animals and it is about the environment and it is about compassion and kindness, that we do go through some guilt of like, how could I have been so blind? I used to ride motorcycles and I wore full leathers. And I look at that and I think, I was wearing the skin of a dead animal on my body. And it was like so disconnected. And so for me, a big part of my mission is to raise awareness around the things that we do that we don't even think about.
Welcome to the Better Life for Animals podcast, where we amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. Through powerful stories and expert insights, we shine a light on the efforts to rescue, protect, and advocate for animals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Every follower helps us reach more people and support animal sanctuaries. Enjoy the conversation.
Today I thought it would be so much fun to speak to the lady behind the camera who really makes all of this happen. That's the amazing Kathleen Gage of Vegan Visibility. I'm going to let Kathleen introduce herself. However, I want you to know that I'm a huge fan, that I am making a difference because Kathleen is working behind the scenes and encouraging me every step of the way. She is that kind of energy that we all need in this movement. Kathleen, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. It's great to be here. And I have to say that if it wasn't for your lead, let's have a mutually big fan club here, because seriously, you get out and you do the work. And, a little bit about me, I have been vegan coming up on 8 years now. And I have to say that the longer that I'm vegan, and I'm still a baby vegan compared to somebody like yourself, but the longer that I'm vegan, the more layers that get taken off of what the truth is. Recently, you introduced me to the book Vistopia by Claire Mann, and I've got to tell you, I'm checking all the boxes of the frustration, the anxiety, the depression, the anger towards what's going on in the world, that people don't recognize what the truth is. And yet what I realize is that there's a way to present the information that people are more receptive to it. And so that's really what I enjoy about the fact I'm working with you and putting the vegan message out there in a way that it's about animal sanctuaries. But when I first decided to stop eating animal and dairy products, I didn't do it for any altruistic reasons. It was simply because I had inflammation. I was 64 at the time, and I was like, okay, I've got to do something about my health. And I would not identify as a vegan because I thought vegans were crazy. And now that I've been vegan for a while, identifying as such, I know that we are, which is a good thing. It's a good crazy. But I actually identified as a plant-based eater, and what I did is I started watching the documentaries and reading the books and reading the blogs and listening to podcast shows, and the more information I gathered, the less that I could deny what the truth is, which is animals suffer in a just untold ways. And one day I was at the grocery store, and it was about 6 months into not eating any animal or dairy products, and I'm walking by the meat department, and I had a visceral response to looking at what was in the shelves and the cabinets, and realizing these were animals who had suffered. And it was in that moment that I identified as a vegan and have not gone back. In that time, I changed my company name. I've had my business 31 years, and 32 years, and I decided I'm going all in with the whole vegan message. And initially, it was different than what it is today. Today, it definitely is about the animal. So with that, that's kind of like a Reader's Digest version of who I am.
Thanks, Kathleen. I think it's understandable and common to come to this through health, because that's how we're raised to believe that we need to take care of ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. What I find interesting is oftentimes once someone is able to take care of their body and understand that eating plant-based is good for everyone, then they start to look and they start to recognize, oh my goodness, what's been going on? And I think the disconnect is bridged because you're able to know, well, I'm not participating in that anymore. So what's going on? And as you said, I saw this morning on, I think it's Fonoletics, was saying that those movies actually do help move the needle. So for that reason, I'm thankful they're out there. Of course, it's horrific what goes on, and it's going on at an ever-increasing rate as we speak. Nothing that's going on current event-wise is helping that matter, unfortunately. But it's also, because it's going to get more difficult, I believe, it's also going to be an opportunity for people to wake up. Because in my view, this is all about us being raised and trained simply to be asleep, to look away, to not pay attention to things because they're kept from us, and that's intentional. But it's our responsibility to wake up and to know what we're putting in our bodies, know what impact we're having, because that's why we're human. We have agency, we have a choice. And speaking of Claire Mann, Kathleen, I've known about her as well, and it's funny how when you're ready, things just present, because I decided, we talk about this as positive as we want to be, because we want to get this message out in a way that everyone feels that they can join us. It's dark, and it can be very sad and upsetting, and there's situations where you just don't know how to get your point across without alienating people. So I decided to sign up for Claire Mann's course, and it's so great for me to be able to learn ways to articulate the angst that's going on inside. The little moment, like I'll just give you one example, where she was talking about how often when we're talking about plant-based or vegan or the animals, people will in that conversation go, oh, I can't look at that, or I don't want to know about it, or oh, it's so painful. And oftentimes because we don't want to go into that pain either, because we aren't trained, we just change the subject, or we segue to, yeah, well, you don't have to, let's have tofu, or let's, things are getting better. We say something to kind of move us off of the point, where if we had actually said, how does that feel? And stayed with that person and stayed with our own pain, that there would be a moment to perhaps open a window. I hadn't thought about that this past week. So I'm going to be working on ways to get deeper in my conversations, more effective because that's what it's all about. And that's what I have. And that's what we have to offer is our voice. So just a little segue on that one. But
well, I'm curious because as I'm reading her book, I'm only on chapter 3 right now, and it's one of those books that, and I have found this with Leah Garces, her book, Transformation, and then there was Will Potter's book, Little Red Barns. As I read them, I can only read in degrees because the information is so intense. Even though I've been doing this for a while and I know a lot of what the truth is, there's still a lot I have to learn. But as I read it, I think, how can we talk to the people that, one, make fun of us for being vegan when it's not about us, it's about the animals? And what are some strategies that we can use? And that's what I'm really hoping to get from Claire's book. And I'm really excited that you're going through her course, because I plan to get that through osmosis with you. It's like, I know that we'll have conversations about it, but the reality is that there's so much pain and suffering in the world. And I believe that's the foundation of all the pain and suffering that extends out into other areas of life. And when I have people that will say, oh, well, I'm going to have my meal, and they go, well, I'm going to go have a steak to make up for what you're eating. And it's like, are you really that insensitive? And I don't know that people necessarily are trying to be insensitive. I think that it's their own ignorance and their own lack of knowledge that causes them to do that. So what would you say to somebody that jokingly teases you about being vegan? How do we respond to that because I know that there's a part of me that just wants to lash out at them, and that's not going to be effective.
Well, I would remind them that this isn't about me. I'm going to be fine. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this because, and I'm thinking about the animals. Did they deserve to be treated that way? Did they volunteer to give up their life? I think not. So I would turn it back to the animals. I wouldn't let them think they're doing anything to hurt me.
Okay. And which actually is a beautiful segue into the work that you're doing that has really evolved nicely over the last year, and it's moving into areas that the two of us never really imagined. One is we just got through doing the summit, the funding blueprint for sanctuaries, where it's teaching sanctuaries how to raise money and how to have consistent revenue streams and donation streams, because with sanctuaries, that's the number one challenge that they deal with, is having consistent money coming in to take care of the animals. And then we're going to be doing a summit for teens who are vegan and who want to be vegan and they want to take care of the animals, the podcast show. So let's talk about some of what has happened over the last year with your own, if you will, your own coming of age and awakening around the animals and around the animal sanctuaries, and what is planned for the future.
Sure. Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was frightening at the beginning. And I think it shows in the beginning that I was nervous and maybe a little bit rigid reading my scripts, as I still like to have my scripts, as you know, Kathleen, but that's okay. I also like to have a conversation. So I have really relaxed into it because I have to remind myself every day, all the time, it's not about me. I'm not thinking that I have anything special to offer, just that I have a desire. And so over time, I have been gaining confidence. I have been working at being more natural. And what's really hit me are the stories, the incredible guests that we have. And first of all, the community has been so generous. We've had some very, very famous people in this movement, and they've pretty much all said yes. So thank you for that. And I think they do it because of the movement. They're doing it for the animals, for the same reason that we're all doing it. And then to hear some of these stories about these sanctuary owners, founders, that some of them have larger, establishments, and they have a legacy in place, and they've got staff, and that's great, and that's what we want the model to be. But so many of them have been, they have a small situation, they are maybe the only person, maybe they have one other person, a neighbor even, I heard in one case, that watches them while she's at work. When I heard that, I'm like, okay, let me get this straight. You do all of that and you have to hold down a job. So this is what really woke me up to what's going on out there and how important it is for everyone to know that these animals are being rescued and living out their lives as nature intended because of these amazing humans who aren't looking for any kind of accolades. They're not looking to be even, some of them are maybe nervous to be on a podcast, right. Understandably so. Some of them step up and do it anyway because for the same reason they're doing for the animals. So when we saw those people, Kathleen, I think that's when I really got at a deeper level how important this work is, because there are over 1,000 sanctuaries just in the United States that are in some cases just barely getting by. And then you think about the political situation, which it's always been difficult, but it's more difficult now to get funding, to get grants, all the things that people need to succeed. So I am so happy to be able to put a spotlight on that, and then also to recognize that I really think it's going to be through programs with children that really make that bridge between I'm out here in suburbia and the sanctuaries out there in the country, perhaps. How do we make those two talk?
Right.
So we have Daniel Hanisch, who is the founder of LEAP, who has created these incredible programs to help with teenagers learn about leadership and compassion. And I think she's working, and we want to work with her to help get that program into more sanctuaries, because throughout the country, if everyone knows that this is wouldn't it be great if when you became 14, you understood that, you're going to be volunteering at a sanctuary?
Right.
And that it's cool to do so, and that it's cool to be compassionate. That's the message I want to get out. That's the message that Danielle is doing so beautifully. And that's the work I see us going forward, doing more of, because parents invest in their children. There's a funding source there. And there's an opportunity for everyone to see sanctuaries as in a new light, out there in the communities.
Right. Well, what's exciting is that we are now in a position where we're asking for donations for Better Life for Animals, because it is a nonprofit, and that helps us to keep doing the work that we're doing. And one of the ways we do this is we offer free master classes, free summits, and we invite people to go ahead and make a donation. And it's always exciting when somebody is willing to do that. It's not required, but with the teens, it reminds me of recently we had the opportunity to have lunch together in Henderson, Nevada, and I think we were in Vegas when we had lunch. And that whole area, it's grown so much. But I live in Oregon, you live in Henderson. And I was there visiting family, and of course I had to put time aside so that the two of us could meet. Well, my grandniece, I should say, she is 9 years old. She's turning 10 in a couple of days, and she knows I'm vegan. And it was so sweet because she was so protective over my food. She said, now make sure that you don't eat this because it's not vegan. And I said, do you understand what vegan is? She goes, yes, it's not eating animals. And I said, and why would it be that somebody wouldn't eat animals? And she said, because they get tortured. And I mean, she had such wisdom. And I said, well, tell me what happens to a baby cow when it's born. And she goes, well, it's taken away from its mother so that the mother can have milk. And I was like, this child knows so much. And that's the conversation that will start the awareness. Because even though she said, well, I'm not vegan. And I said, well, I'm not asking you to be vegan. She started the conversation, which I thought was just profound. And then her brother, who is 15 or 16, we were at a restaurant, and he goes, Aunt Kathy, I think this selection would be really good for you. And he read the menu to me, and he read the selection that had no meat or dairy in it. And I said, well, thank you so much. That was so kind of you. And to have young people with that kind of awareness. But what I love about Better Life for Animals is that we keep evolving and offering more and more information, because that's what we're here to do, is provide information to people to make better choices for better lives for animals. And one is through the summits that we do, and we have 3 coming up in the next year. We have the master classes that we're doing. We had 2 very successful master classes. One was the grant writing masterclass, and the other one was PR and media. And these are things that can be very overwhelming for people. And what I didn't know about grant writing, and I found this out through a friend of mine who actually works for United Way. She's the CEO of United Way. If there's anything in the grant that is about DEI, you can lose the funding, which is just boggles my mind. Because unfortunately, a lot of immigrants who are not documented are forced into forced labor within factory farms. And there's the whole human rights aspect that a lot of people don't even consider. I remember years ago when I first started studying about factory farms, I didn't realize that people were there against their will. I really didn't know. I thought people just willingly worked at factory farms, and come to find out that they're indentured servants. Mm-hmm. The farmers are, the workers are, and people have no idea of what's going on. And so what I really appreciate about what we're doing is that we're offering information on all different levels. It's about the animals, it's about human rights, it's about the environment. And recently, with the whole overturn of, I think it was the EPA, that the current administration overturned some laws that were put in place to protect the environment, and now there's no protection. It's like, just boggles my mind.
It is very sad. And look at the new food pyramid.
Oh, don't get me started. Well, get me started on that. Yeah, go
Right.
ahead, get me started.
Well, but there's no facts or research or science behind that new food pyramid. It's just propaganda for the meat and dairy industry. So that's where we are, and it scares me because we have young people coming up and they have only maybe seen this. So we have to have vehicles in place to counteract that, because this information is available. We know that a plant-based vegan diet is the way to go on every level. And to throw that out the window at a time like this is just so detrimental. I mean, there are so many things going on that are detrimental, like you mentioned, the EPA. It all starts with climate change, and we all know that that's real. And to be told that it's a hoax, I mean, what happens when young people hear, well, it's a hoax? You know? So I am all about counteracting that, getting, being informative, and having guests that are experts on our show to be able to talk about all aspects of a better life for animals, of which humans are also a part. And, it's ironic and it's tragic and sad, as you said, Kathleen, with, all going on with immigrants being rounded up and put in warehouses to be deported. Well, it's those same people that have been running the slaughterhouses and the factory farms. And so that's going to be interesting in a bad way as to how are they going to source that, So I am all about keeping this conversation going and finding humane, kind ways, because I have a feeling that this is all going to blow up under its own weight. Right. We just have too much information out there today. We know too much, I believe, as a society to want to just put it away for, the current administration.
I think that sometimes it's convenient to put it away. I think for some people that if they just pretend it doesn't exist, that it makes their life easier. And yet life has a way of just coming right in our face and saying, no, wake up. And one of the things that I have heard, I don't know how true this is, but with factory farms, as they get rid of the undocumented immigrants, and I say that with a lot of love and respect for the people that have been working there, that have been put in very tough situations, that are being separated from their families. I mean, we could go into a whole area with that, but that apparently AI is going to come in and they're going to have robots that are doing the slaughtering. So, there's things going on. It's very dystopian where we're not even aware of what the truth is. But I want to take a step back and have you share a little bit about why you went vegan, when you went vegan, why you went vegan. And I know you well enough to know what drives you and what motivates you. But for the people listening, for your community that you've been building so nicely, what drives you? So let's start with when you went vegan, why you went vegan, and what really drives you to keep doing what you're doing. You're listening to Better Life for Animals podcast. Our mission is to amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. First of all, go ahead and subscribe to this channel wherever you're watching or listening. And then get involved by visiting betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. Be sure to check out our blog, learn more about incredible sanctuaries, and explore our book section, where 100% of net proceeds from book sales are donated to sanctuaries. Every action you take helps to make a difference. And remember, subscribe to this channel. And now, back to the show.
Well, I grew up like everyone else. I went and took a school bus tour of a dairy farm, saw what appeared to be completely happy cows. We all got our little carton of milk. I mean, those were happy memories. I had no idea what those cows were going through. But as an adult, after you learn about these things, and I remember hearing about these animals are not having a life. There is nothing good about being an animal trapped inside of the factory farm food system from beginning to end. So once I recognized that there's nothing about this that's humane, it's not, I remember hearing they live a beautiful life until the end. And none of that there is the end, but there is no truth to they live a beautiful life. They're not living life, any of these animals, from the beginning of conception to the end. So once I became fully connected with that fact, I turned it off. I said, I can't do this anymore. They don't even have a life. I said this to a friend. They don't have a life. We don't give them a life. I am not going to participate in this anymore. And that was 20 years ago. And I haven't looked back. And it's not, for me, I just haven't had any moment where I thought, oh, just this once. Because every time, every day, I think about those animals. And this feeling has grown over the years. It hasn't gotten less. In the beginning, I was just happy to be taking that step for myself. And then over time, it becomes, I don't like being around other people who are participating in it. And I wish that they could understand what's going on, because as we know, society has allowed us to ignore that. In fact, that's their desire. So over time, I've gotten more advocates. I become an advocate for this over time. And every year it's been, I'm not doing enough. And I've tried to do a lot, but I'm like, what more can I do? So that's where I met with you, Kathleen. And I still don't think we're doing enough. The reason I say that is because the problem is massive. And although we are making an impact, this system continues to grow just because of population growth, So I am happy to be a part of this. I'm proud, and if tomorrow were my last day, I could say, you know what, I tried. I did something for the animals, and that's what drives me.
Well, and I want to remind people where they can find your website, which is betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. And on there, we do have the newsletter, we have the podcast, we have the blog, we have a donate button. So if you're finding value in this conversation, please go and make a small donation. Anything helps. And that allows us to do more of the work that we're here to do, which, what I find so amazing is before I became vegan, I was working in the animal industry. I actually had done a crowdfunding for a rescue dog, and my wife and we actually have a self-funded sanctuary where I didn't even realize that until a friend of mine said, do you realize that you have a self-funded sanctuary? It's like, never thought about it. But we've got horses, we've got dogs, we've got chickens, we've got a rooster. We had a ferret at one point. We had a goat at one point. You name it, we've probably had it. But prior to becoming vegan, I was consuming meat, and I was working within the pet industry, and it came as a result of doing a crowdfunding for a rescue dog that showed up on our property. We're out in Oregon. We've got a few acres, and this dog showed up on our property. We couldn't even tell what kind of dog it was, and it turns out it was a toy Shih Tzu, and it had been a puppy mill dog. And by the time it came on our property, it was near dead. I mean, we thought we were going to have to actually put it to rest. Had rotted out teeth, infection in the eyes, tumors on the belly, and female who had been bred over and over and over and abused, and was flat on one side, could barely move. And it's like, how did this dog survive? Well, with proper love and care and some great vet care, she lived for another 4 years and knew love like nothing else. I mean, she was definitely my heart dog. And it was through her that I had an opportunity to go into the pet industry. Somebody saw something I did online, invited me to speak at a conference. One thing led to another. And at one point, about 80% of my revenue stream came from people within the pet industry. I was still eating animals. And the day that I realized what a disconnect I had, I went through sadness, I went through sorrow, and I went through guilt. And I think it's very common for people who become vegan and really get what it means to be vegan, that it is about the animals and it is about the environment and it is about compassion and kindness, that we do go through some guilt of like, how could I have been so blind? I used to ride motorcycles and I wore full leathers. And I look at that and I think, I was wearing the skin of a dead animal on my body. And it was like so disconnected. And so for me, a big part of my mission is to raise awareness around the things that we do that we don't even think about. The personal care products, for example, it's not difficult to get on the internet and look for cruelty-free products that are also vegan, because you can actually buy cruelty-free, which means it's not tested on animals, but it's not vegan, which I don't understand that disconnect. But what I do is when I buy any kind of personal care products, I look for products that have not been tested on animals, because that's a whole nother part of the industry that most people have no clue about. And then also vegan. And those are real simple choices that we can make. And some people say, well, one person doesn't make a difference, but you add up one person with one person with one person, and it does start making a difference. And it makes a difference to my soul and my spirit, because I think that I've been on a spiritual journey since I was in my 20s, so I'm going way back, quite a few years. And I look at all the things that I did to become enlightened, if you will. The most spiritual thing that I've ever done, there's two. One is I gave up drinking 42 years ago because I used to fall down a lot when I drank. A lot. It's like I was always on the ground. It's like, what happened? And then I wouldn't remember it. But I'm very allergic to alcohol. And so I gave that up. That was a spiritual awakening for me. And the other one was becoming vegan and identifying as vegan, to know that I'm doing what I can to have more compassion around the animals and to raise awareness. And I know this is true for you and myself and many other vegans, is sometimes we just don't think we're doing enough. And what I've realized is you have to pick your lane. You have to pick your lane and go deep into that lane. Claire Mann, for example, is a great example of somebody who has picked a lane. She's working with people on the emotions around once you identify as vegan and how you deal with life in general. Katrina Fox is another example. She's a PR person and has done some phenomenal stuff. Leah Garces, she transformation. She's doing some amazing work in the world. Will Potter is another example. He's an investigative journalist that has dug deep into what the truth is. And I could go on and on. With your podcast, what are some of the stories that really they stand out as just incredible stories of what people are doing? You know, I think of the different sanctuaries where they specialize, like some are primates, you know, sanctuary for primates, and then you have sanctuaries for goats, and you have sanctuaries for guinea pigs. And I was like, I never knew that. I thought a sanctuary just did farmed animals, and now I sit on the board of directors for a local sanctuary. So for you, what are some of the stories that really stand out?
Well, I love Miyoko Skinner, and she has a turkey named Fred Astaire, and I've seen pictures of him wandering through the kitchen while they're cooking. He is a member of the family, and I am so touched by that. Every Thanksgiving, I think about him and I talk about him, because that's an animal that has a heart and has a family and knows love, and we just don't give those turkeys that kind of life in most cases. So to see it is so rare and so beautiful and inspirational. I've also there's been so many great stories, but there's one where we interviewed, I think it's Piedmont Farm Animal Sanctuary in North Carolina, where they are building an animal-centered architecture that's built around what the animals need, not what people need in order to house the animals. I thought it was such an interesting, novel concept, and why haven't we thought of this sooner? So, you know, as an example, cows don't like necessarily to be inside of a barn because they want to be able to see what's going on around them. And chickens, how many people know that chickens are actually a bird from the Amazon that want to be in, they don't want to be out in the dirt. They like to get, their feathers dusted, but otherwise they want to be undercover as well. Ducks always, of course, in order to feel safe, they need to be near water. So they make sure that the animals have what they would naturally look for and need in order to thrive in nature. So those have been some great stories. And we've had some sad ones where people have had to move, abruptly because of fires, and they find themselves in another state. And maybe the community isn't maybe as supportive, and there's a lot of pushback that they have to deal with, and yet they carry on. We had one where Helen Demis, who did her podcast while walking around her property. And while the sound quality wasn't what it could be, we got to see what her life is actually like every day. She posted once a picture of her with her hair all blown out because she'd just come in from the wind. This is what it's like to run a sanctuary. And so for those of us who don't have that lifestyle, I'm so thankful and happy to be able to try and support them.
Right. It's interesting because when people hear the word sanctuary, they go, oh, you're so lucky you get to be around the animals all the time. But what they don't realize is some of these animals come in really, really bad shape. One of our rescue horses, he came out of a rescue that there were 100 horses that had been abandoned. This was about 17 years ago. They had been abandoned in the high desert in Oregon, and by the time they were discovered, 60 of them were already dead. They were being taken down to Mexico. It was for the meat trade, and due to gas prices, they had abandoned them. There were 40 that were left, and our neighbor was fostering a mare. Well, they didn't know that she was pregnant at the time. She was so thin and had not had proper care, obviously. And she was definitely a wild horse. And at first, we couldn't even get near her. But they found out she was pregnant. And the day that Dustin was born, we decided we were going to take him on. It's like we wanted to give him a home. And he's like a big puppy dog. He's nearly 17 years old now. And there was a lot of care that went into that. The vet care for the animals that go into sanctuaries can be astronomical. Floating the teeth of horses, that can be several $100s, and that has to be done on a regular basis. Many of these horses that are rescued, their hooves have not been taken care of. The cows, they've been abused. It goes on and on. So it's not just romanticizing the fact that, oh, you get to be around animals. It's really about the care for these animals. And so it's really exciting as I think about what you're doing in the world, and that you're really coming into your life's work in a way that you didn't anticipate, and yet you're doing it. It's unfolding, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. And again, I want to remind people to go to your website, betterlifeforanimals.com. Sign up for the newsletter. There's plenty of places that it'll give you the opportunity to sign up. And when we have master classes, join in, because the master classes, we're really focusing on the business side of running a sanctuary. We're bringing information to the community so that it makes your job easier. And we will have these available for replay. And again, if you want to make a donation, we'd really appreciate it. And I encourage people to get your books. There's a section on your website where you have your 3 children's books. Tell us about that. What inspired you to write these children's books? And those are published through Lantern Publishing. We just had a conversation with the owner of Lantern Publishing recently, and they may be open to partnering with us on some of our future events. So I'm kind of speaking this into reality.
Well, I was so upset during COVID when I was listening to NPR, and there was this famous chef who was talking about the milk channel had been shut off because they were just pouring milk out because they didn't have distribution for it to get to restaurants and the general public. And his suggestion was that the government turn it over to the restaurant industry, who would have the ability to get it distributed. And I was so upset because I thought at the time of COVID, with all that was going down, that surely this would be our opportunity to wake up and recognize why we were having a pandemic in the first place, and surely we wouldn't be going down the dairy path any longer. But in fact we did, and so I wrote a book called Gabriel about a little calf slated to become veal that just got lost during the shuffle and was rescued. And I was just trying to point out that these little calves they miss their mothers. They have, cows, as you heard it said, are just big puppies. So I wanted to get that message out. And once I got started, I recognized I really needed to try and cover as many farm animals as I could. So the next one I wrote was entitled Cluck, which is about not just chickens, but also fowl turkeys. I was inspired when I went to visit Best Friends Animal Sanctuary in Utah, where they have this whole sanctuary separate, enclosed in glass, where you can come in and see these traumatized, oftentimes tropical birds who are in such a state of PTSD that they self-mutilate. And if you go into this enclosure, you have to remain silent. Some of them have little sweaters on because they pick at themselves. So I wanted to make sure that was covered in the book, because people think having an exotic bird is so cool. However, those birds live to be 100 years old, and they have no business inside of a cage, inside of a home. So there was that book, because Cluck was a fortunate little bird who was born in a sanctuary, and his elders protected him. But down the road was what, to their horror, was being built, but basically the equivalent to a Chick-fil-A off the freeway of a warehouse where they were going to be housing factory chickens. So that story talks about the disconnect and the sadness, and how these birds are loving. They also love their families. They also want to live. And how all my books have a call to action component in them, because we did save Cluck in the book, but what about all the others? And then finally, the last one I've written was entitled Pickle, which was based on a true story. Doing some research I learned about during like a hurricane, as an example. Animals are left to fend for themselves. Most of them don't make it, but if you do make it, if you do survive, then you are no longer eligible for slaughter. So I wrote about basically a true story about a pig who found his way out of that horrible situation and was rescued, and found himself, fortunately, at the end in the arms of a sanctuary. So those are my 3 children's books.
And they're available on Amazon. They're available on your website, and 100% of net proceeds do go to sanctuaries. And that's one of the things that I think is important for people to hear, is that much of the money that you bring in will go to sanctuaries to continue the work that they do. So with that, Cheryl, this has been so delightful. I can't tell you how grateful I am that our paths have crossed, and it's exciting to see what's unfolding for Better Life for Animals, for the two of us as vegans, and how we can impact other people to at least explore the options that are available with living as a vegan, with being compassionate to animals, with being kinder to the earth, and around health, because I know that, the whole situation with our healthcare system, I mean, there's so many rabbit holes that we can go down as far as why being vegan is such a great choice. So with that, listen to me. It's like, okay. With that, thank you for joining me on Better Life for Animals. With that, what are your final thoughts for people as we wrap this up?
Well, everything you just said is so true. And a compassionate way to live is when you let the animals live their lives on their own terms. And that includes humans. And what I find beautiful is that because we are humans and because we have agency, we can make a different choice with your next meal. And that is very hopeful. So I really also appreciate working with you. Together, I think we make a good team. And I'm looking forward to getting more people on our show who want to speak about compassion and are doing amazing things so that we can create a better life for animals.
Alrighty.
Thank you for joining us on the Better Life for Animals podcast. Together, we can create a world where all beings are treated with dignity, respect, and care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people and spread awareness about the incredible work happening in animal sanctuaries. You can also share this episode with friends and fellow advocates to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep speaking up, taking action, and making a difference for the animals.